Hello, welcome back to the channel. I'm Justin Gambrell. Today, we're going to once again be continuing to talk about how we chop on the Dobro. In the last two videos, we've gone over the more basic side of just how you chop. The first chop to review that we went over was chopping like a mandolin, where you're just running across the strings to kind of just make that chuck sound. The second was where you more pluck the strings like how a banjo would do, where we worked with the third, fourth, and sixth strings to go. And we even learned a little bit of how to change that up a little bit, choosing different strings to be doing in different instances. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit more on how to take those basic chop skills and make them a little more fancy, make them fill the rhythm, and add a lot more to the sound of backing up whoever's singing or playing a lead melody. So we're going to go a little bit into each. Now, as we go into this, this will not be exhaustive. This is going to show you tips and tricks on how to make it sound a little more different that you can then go and figure out how it might sound best in whatever song you're going to go with. So first, let's start with how we can add a little bit more to the mandolin chop. Now the mandolin chop, as we know, starts with just running your thumb pick across the strings as you mute it with your palm of your left hand. Now, if you've ever played an acoustic guitar where you just learn how to strum, not even bluegrass strumming, but just general acoustic guitar, you know that they tell you to keep going up and down consistently with your hand. And sometimes you'll strum, sometimes you just might glide over it without ever touching the strings. And we're actually going to do the same type of exercise here with chopping on the dobro, where I'm going to constantly make a very even rhythm, or not even rhythm, but even movement of my hand going back and forth as we go. And you'll notice that I keep going back and forth. It's the same rhythm, but sometimes I'm muting it more, sometimes I'm letting it ring out. So it takes a chop that goes like this. And we're adding the chord kind of on those extra strums up, which I'm going to use my index finger to be doing that. And as we go through the different chords, it makes it sound like there's a lot more of a rhythm to it. And even sometimes when I do it, I might not do it every time. Maybe it's just as a little flair here and there. And this is especially great in instances where you might not have as much accompaniment. Maybe you're playing in a small group for a jam or performing with just a couple other people and you don't have the full rhythm. It's a nice way to still add the chord because, and I'll continue to use the song we've been using with Mama Don't 'Low, the difference between Mama Don't 'Low, no bluegrass playing around here, and Mama Don't 'Low, no bluegrass playing around here. Mama Don't 'Low, no bluegrass playing around here. Well, just to show that it adds so much more than just that simple chop rhythm. It fills out the chords and you can have different rhythms with it. And that's one that you can just experiment. When do I want to strum and hold it open? When do I want to make it have that more percussive sound? And that all comes between just with your left hand, with the steel, when you keep the steel all the way down, and when you lift it back up to mute. And so, now's the time where I'll probably just keep going and start talking into how we can deal with the banjo rhythm. But now's a great time that if you want to pause the video, take some time to really work with this a little bit more. And try different ways. Different songs, I'm going to do it differently. But just get used to trying to rhythmically add in some extra full chords into just that basic chop. And you can even listen to some mandolin players that they'll do the same thing with the mandolin in how they go back and forth and maybe add some extra chords. But let's move forward also again to the banjo chop. That when we're just going, the first thing that I like to do is taking a little bit from what the guitar does, where you can add the bass note. And so in that, I kind of hop between using my thumb and then my index and ring finger. And you'll notice a lot of this that actual banjo players will be doing that same thing as well, where they'll kind of jump around between different fingers. But as I go with this, I also can think in that same sort of rhythm I had before, where we go. So with that, I'm not just playing the simple offbeat, but I'm kind of adding a little bit of extra. And you can still hear that big moment where there's the chop, but then I'm still playing some half-muted extra notes that will go underneath of what we're hearing for that chop. And you can do this as you play different strings up and down. I know we had talked about that in that video, that you can use different strings, but the difference between what I use as the top. Maybe you want to hop that bass note around a little. At this point, I'm even just starting to mess around. But what I do is mostly that basic thing I first said. You're hopping between your different fingers, letting it feel almost like this extra bounce around the strings. It's something that just adds that little extra almost swing. I swing these notes a little bit to kind of add that extra bounce to what you're doing. And this is a video above all else that I really want to say. Mess around with it. Just start to feel music, feel rhythms, especially if you listen to different drummers in different genres. That the kinds of stuff that they're doing between their different instruments, or different drums in front of them, my apologies, that you can kind of match that a little bit. Because that's all we're going for, is adding percussion to what's being played in the group. And so, all that I've given has been quite a variety of different, easier, and a little more intricate ways to be making the chop a little more full, a little more rhythmic. And so now I'm going to go back to Mama Don't Allow, and I'm going to actually do one time through, playing it a little more like the one style, and the other time through, playing it like the other style. So you can kind of listen to how it sounds beyond just the simple chop that I had done in the last couple of videos. So let's take a moment now to check that out. Mama don't allow no bluegrass playing around here. Mama don't allow no bluegrass playing around here. Well, we don't care, Mama don't allow, 'cause we're gonna play it anyhow. Mama don't allow no bluegrass playing around here. Well, Mama don't allow no Dobro playing around here. Mama don't allow no Dobro playing around here. Well, we don't care, Mama don't allow, 'cause I'm gonna play it anyhow. Mama don't allow no Dobro playing around here. So that gives you the two different styles kind of side by side, and you really can see how the two of them both function within the same song, the same kind of just regular guitar rhythm that you get in the background, but how they both emphasize different aspects. Being able to listen to that clip back before I recorded this, I even began to notice a couple different things. Between the two, the more rhythmic type like the banjo, where we go, that ends up being a lot more laid back. It kind of gives that little bit of a groove. It's not quite as in your face as when you chop more like the mandolin. Even at about the same rhythm, the mandolin chop is pushing you forward. It's going right into your face and saying, this is what we're doing. where the other one is more laid back, more chill, as I say. And as you listened to that, you might say, I really like that one, and I think it's incredible. And somebody else is going to listen to it and say, the other one was so much better, it felt so much more right. I mean, even myself, I know I tend to do that mandolin chop and be in your face a lot more than the rhythmic, and the more banjo style. And I think that even shows in just how well I play each of the two. I also began to do a lot of other sort of ways to flourish it that in my mind has just become more natural because I work on it so much more. You'll see or you'll probably hear that I slid up. So even when I was doing like that for that bass note, I would sometimes go down to the F from the G and kind of just slide up before keeping going. I would do the same thing a little with the mandolin. Or it's just that little bit of extra movement that just keeps it from getting all stale and stagnant. I would also use some of these to help go with a kind of transition, because where you might use a flat 7 chord to go to the 4 chord, when we move to the C, you might use an F. I would use that. We're kind of using those notes on the 3rd, 4th, and 6th strings to kind of just help transition that around, hitting that F chord real quick and then going down to the C. And I would use that in both styles, as I showed you right there with the banjo and with the mandolin. And that's just more ways how we can just continue to add to what's there, especially when we're playing with fewer instruments, as I said. Now, everything that I've shown is all completely optional. Nothing is required to play dobro, nothing is required to be played in bluegrass. The simple ways that I've shown before is exactly all you need to do. This is just showing more ways to make different songs sound different, to be able to add to the rhythm. You may disagree with me on how I do all this. You may not. It depends on what you think sounds better to the music. So I hope that this just offers more ways for you to think differently about how you're chopping, how you're playing in the background, and how to go about doing that. And so please take this, mess around, practice, listen to different dobro players, see what they do and how they make different things sound different ways. And always keep working to try to improve. Thanks for listening.